Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Nuggets News. Today we've got a special guest, and that's Gary, the president of IvyKoin. How you going, Gary?
Hi Alex, how you doing?
Pretty good, thanks. Now, you guys have been pretty busy lately. You've had your ICO successfully raised, and you're in the space of helping with payments, not only between banks but between B2B, as you said, businesses, and collecting more data points because we often hear about accounts getting frozen, anything to do with crypto. They don't like to interface with banks, and that's the main solution that IvyKoin's trying to solve.
Yeah, definitely. I think B2B is the primary use case that we've been looking at, and that's the issue that we want to solve. We hear of a lot of stories of existing businesses that are trying to transact using crypto, and then once it gets flagged by a bank, that account is either frozen and ultimately closed and told to go somewhere else. So we hope to provide a solution to help validate those transactions and to help legitimize that particular customer and say, listen, whatever the bank was concerned about, here's some visibility over who that person is, what they're using their funds for, and ultimately, this is a way that they can participate in the traditional financial services industry.
Yeah, we'll get into the tech a little bit more, but just quickly, another reason I wanted to have you guys on was because of your backgrounds. Strong financial backgrounds, ex CEOs of PayPal and ANZ. There's also an Australian connection with an ASX listed company, Change Financial. Do you want to talk about the background and the idea and how this all came to be?
Yeah, so the Change Financial is a ASX listed public company. Today, they own one third of Ivy, and so for us, we have deep connections into Australia. A lot of our management team is from Australia. We just happen to believe there's good talent there, and ultimately, the reason why we went to Australia for our pre-sale and for our capital raise was we had some partners there that we had worked with in the past. We thought that from a regulatory standpoint, Australia was a great environment for us to go raise the capital that we needed in order to get the company off the ground.
Yeah.
Just previous experience has told us that this was the market that made most sense for us at the time, and it was really successful. And we're happy to have so many team members that are from Australia.
Australians love their crypto as well, so there's no surprise you had no trouble raising the funds here. So, what you're offering is a software as a service, I guess. So, a lot of people sort of like to compete or Ripple that are doing interbank settlement, but it's very different, as we said. So, people are pretty familiar by now with Know Your Customer and having to take their old photo with their driver's license and whatnot. But it's the Know Your Transaction and all those extra data points that are going to be embedded in Ivy through smart contracts. And do you want to talk about all those benefits and the problem that that's solving?
Yeah, sure. So, from a pure regulatory standpoint and from a banking standpoint, there's a natural evolution of what's happened. KYC has been around for a few years. Everyone in crypto land has been talking about it. There are basic data points that, in general, all institutions are looking for in order to validate who that customer is. For us, we're looking at the potential next steps of what that might be. Additional data points as it relates to who the customer is, where the source of funds was coming from, and then in addition, as you mentioned, the KYT, knowing information about the particular transaction themselves. I think these are concepts that we've been circulating with our bank partners and also with the regulators that we've been speaking to, and we see this as an evolution. For regulatory agencies, as time goes on, they're looking for how do we better protect the consumer? How do we better make sure that we're not participating in any money laundering or Bank Secrecy Act violations. And in order to do that, you can almost think of it as every year we need to constantly improve. So I think for us, there's definitely the base KYC that everyone talks about, regardless of whether you're a bank or an intermediary or other institution that needs to validate who the customer is. We're thinking, what are the next steps beyond that, and working with entities to help develop that program, and ultimately to provide more security, safety, and validation of customers and transactions and payments in this case.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, sort of on the roadmap, there's not a lot of detail. Is that something you're maybe going to add to? Because I'm interested, is the real target audience sort of domestic transactions, or do you think this is going to be far more useful for international commerce going forward? Again, anything to do with crypto, as well as being international transactions, has just got so much friction these days.
Yeah, well, I think for what we're looking to build, I think there is application throughout, and it's not just sort of a domestic product, and we're just focusing on a particular market. I think there's particular use cases for us that are important. I think first is really just the B2B transaction and taking a look at why things are being declined today, why things are being frozen, and how can we break apart those pieces of resistance.
Yep.
But beyond that, ultimately we see ourselves as really the bridge between crypto world and the traditional financial institution. Not to say that this applies to everything and everyone, but it's a channel to get into some of the benefits that the traditional financial services has today that is maybe unavailable to members that are participating in the crypto economy.
Yeah, exactly. So what's next for you guys now? There hasn't been a lot of sort of marketing, partnerships. I think you've got one big US bank on board. Is there anything else you can tell us in terms of sort of the roadmap going forward, and what's the plans?
Yeah, well, I think for us in the short term, there are some milestones that we're looking to hit. Ultimately, we're taking a look at sort of the strategic plan and what we hope to accomplish. On the banking side, due to NDAs, unable to share any specific information today. But I think, from a day-to-day standpoint, we're continuing to engage with bank partners, and then on the other side, regulatory agencies as well. We feel like that's really important into building the technology itself. From a marketing PR standpoint, we are accelerating some of the activities that we're having to get more exposure, especially in markets that we haven't been that active in previously. I think ultimately you can see our growth in some of our social media channels, and some of our activities will continue to ramp up. I think we were the last couple of weeks really just trying to build the core team, build a group of individuals in the US that are sort of locked into what we're looking to accomplish long term, and trying to work out what that all looks like. But I think we should see some more activity coming along in the next couple of weeks.
Cool. Yeah, and I appreciate you taking all the questions. As we said in the pre-interview, Gary, I had a few sort of tough questions and concerns. So one of the comments we were getting was, there's not a lot of tech-focused team members or publicly available information such as GitHub. So do you want to touch on why that is?
Yeah, well, I think some of that has to do with internal kind of development, and not feeling like it's in a position to be able to be shared at this point. I think on the other hand, we are also, building part of the tech team. We had sort of a smaller team that began, and I think that's what got us to the original proposal, the original white paper, and some of the layout and the architecture of what we were looking to build. And, over the last couple of months, it's making commitments and actually executing on some of those initial milestones. So I think, we've talked about it internally. I think we do want to have more visibility over technology and the other things that we're developing. So again, I think on GitHub and other channels, you should see some additional information show up in the short term.
Yeah, and headwinds and competition. We know with Swift, clearinghouses, we mentioned Ripple, but a lot of banks are working on their own sort of settlement layers. Is that your competition, and do you feel you guys are at a reasonable stage to compete with that in terms of, I think you're in beta at the moment, how far away until you're really confident with that publicly facing product compared to some of these other solutions that are out there as well?
Yeah, I think I think as a whole, I think there's actually a lot of space for a lot of people to do different things. Some of the companies you mentioned, they're focused on, like Ripple, for example, is focused on cross-border payments, and that's something that we feel they're great at, and they'll probably do a great job of doing. Our focus is a little bit different. I think we take a look at our stance, and we're actually more kind of regulatory technology focused. We're really trying to focus on, it starts with KYC and KYT, and then for us, it's really having to do with the Anti-Money Laundering and Bank Secrecy Act type of problems that we're looking to solve through blockchain.
Yeah.
And so we feel like, honestly, there's a lot of room. We're all for everyone who's doing something positive in this space. We don't see sort of massive competition. And ultimately for us, with our banking partners that we're working with, we're really trying to customize a solution that works for their particular scenario. So, I mean, every bank has its own risk management profile and what they look for in a valid customer, what they consider a high risk transaction, and that differs bank to bank.
Yeah.
And so for us, we're really just trying to create the sort of standardized framework that can be customized to help them through that as they accept payments from the crypto world in the future. And
can you comment on the current state of the working product and how far away roughly publicly release is and all that sort of thing?
I don't want to give away everything. And I think one of the things I want to be clear on is I really don't want to overcommit to something and then not be able to deliver. I think in the next month or two, we should have pretty good estimates on when we think that should be done. I don't want to, again, overcommit at this point, but I do think, in the short term, we'll have more information to share about, what the timelines look like, how we're tracking to the timelines that we originally had agreed to. And then if there's anything to those changes, we want to be able to be proactive and announce to the support groups and to all the token buyers, hey, this is where we're at.
I mean, things take time in the crypto world. Some of the best projects out there have had to push back, months and months. But I think the public always just appreciates that transparency if things are sort of falling behind or whatnot. But next up, I want to talk about IVA versus IVB and the public and private facing chains.
Yeah. So, for us, the IVA network is the public network that has the token that's been issued during the token generation event. And that's what token buyers bought, was the IVA token. That's the mechanism that stores the information in the containers that helps banks either make a yes decision, this is acceptable, or no, it's not acceptable. The IVB network is the private network. It's not private in the sense that there's one centralized entity that controls everything. I think for us, we do view it as a more decentralized model, but it's just not decentralized to everyone. What we envision is in the future to have multiple financial intermediaries and banks themselves, and to have a network of them that share sort of the ledger that keeps track of these transactions, and it's not necessarily a centralized point of control.
Yeah, as we touched on in the pre-interview, some people hear decentralized and they think Bitcoin, 10,000 nodes around the world, whereas compared to traditional two banks talking to each other, we have every bank sort of processing and validating these transactions, so it is more decentralized, I guess, is probably a good way to describe it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Any other final thoughts, mate? Headwinds going forward. There's a few questions about which jurisdictions you need those banking licenses in, and is that something you're working on in each country, or how does that all work?
Yeah. So, at this moment, I think, the problems we're trying to solve exist globally in almost every region. So we're actually speaking to banks all over the world. I think the majority of them are in the US. That's where the company's located. That's where my background comes from, and that's where we're focused on. We do these presentations, especially at banking conferences and things. I happen to be in Austin today at a digital banking conference, speaking with potential partners and banks as well. So for us at this stage, really, it's continuing trying to get our name out, trying to do some marketing and branding, making sure people know who we are, making sure that we're in front of the partners that we want to work with, and ultimately trying to show the solution that we're trying to bring to market. I think that's really what the core team's focused on. Obviously tech development is really important, and for us also building the rest of the core team. I know we have a group of individuals that have been on now for a little bit of time, and we're trying to just supplement that and add the additional pieces that can help accelerate us towards the goals that we've set out to accomplish.
Cool. Well, I appreciate you coming on today. I'm looking forward to following it and keeping track of your progress, because I think there's some pretty interesting stuff going on. So thanks again for coming on today, Gary.
Yeah, thanks for your time, Alex. It was great chatting.
No worries.